In the deep past, long before the first king was crowned, two great rivers carved a destiny through the heart of the desert. This was Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, a place of violent floods and rich, life-giving silt. For millennia, nomads wandered these plains, surviving on what the wild waters provided, unaware.
But eventually, the wandering stopped. The first seeds of permanence were planted, and the reedy huts of the...
To survive here, man had to master the water. They dug canals to tame the floods, turning the arid dust into a garden. With water came abundance. The soil yielded more grain than one family could eat, sparking the first flicker of organized society. As their bellies filled, their minds turned to creation. Clay became their canvas, their tool, and the very foundation of their world.
Surplus grain meant trade. Neighbors became partners, and the isolated village began to transform into something larger.
Across the Fertile Crescent, these pockets of life began to connect, weaving a web of dependence and cooperation. Under the vast Mesopotamian sky, the stage was set. The dawn of the first true civilization was about to break. From the mud, great cities emerged. Eridu, Uruk, Ur, names that would echo through eternity.
They built walls not just for shelter, but for power. The city-state was born, a fortress of order in a chaotic world.
Uruk became the first metropolis. Tens of thousands lived shoulder to shoulder, a density of humanity never before seen on Earth.
Human ingenuity took a leap forward. The wheel turned, and with it, the burden of labor was forever lightened.
But the greatest invention was not physical. To manage their riches, they needed memory. They invented writing. It began as accounting, counting sheep and bushels of barley, but it would soon become the voice of history itself. At the center of the city stood the temple. The gods owned the land, and the priests held the keys to their favor.
The Sumerians believed they were created solely to serve the gods. Their wide-eyed statues stood in
From the priesthood rose the kings, the Lugal, the big man, who claimed the divine right to rule and protect the flock.
The plow tore the earth, multiplying the harvest. The surplus food fed the armies, the builders, and the dreamers. They mastered fire and stone. Metallurgy advanced, forging tools that were stronger and weapons that were deadlier. Trade routes stretched like arteries, bringing blue stones from the mountains and cedar from the forests, enriching the city-states. The Eduba, the tablet house, became the first school. Discipline was harsh, ensuring the art of writing was passed to the next generation. Mass production began here. The potter's wheel churned out vessels by the thousands to hold the grain and beer of the empire. Identity was stamped in clay. The cylinder seal became a signature, a mark of ownership in a complex bureaucracy. Religion was not a private matter. It was the heartbeat of the city. Festivals united the people in awe and celebration. But wealth invites envy. As cities grew, so did the need to defend them. The first organized armies marched to war.
To maintain order among thousands, unwritten customs hardened into law. Justice became a matter of the state, not just personal vengeance.
They were master builders. The arch, the dome, the column, architectural forms that...
By the 3rd millennium BC, Sumer was no longer just a collection of villages. It was a civilization in full bloom. The ziggurat touched the heavens, a man-made mountain where the earth met the sky and where the gods descended to dine. Legends were born in these halls. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, whose quest for immortality would be etched into the world's first epic. The elite lived in luxury. They feasted on the fruits of the land, celebrating a golden age of culture and refinement.
Art mirrored life. In mosaics of blue and white, they depicted their dual reality.
They looked up and measured the cosmos. They divided the hour into 60 minutes, the circle into 360 degrees. These were highways of commerce. Sumerian ships sailed down the Persian Gulf, trading with distant civilizations in the Indus Valley.
Their mathematics was advanced and practical. They calculated areas, volumes, and routes, laying the groundwork for modern science.
Social structures were rigid yet functional. Marriage, inheritance, and family life were governed by strict codes and contracts. The textile industry was the engine of their economy. Sumerian wool was the envy of the ancient world, exported far and wide.
Medicine was a blend of science and spirit. They healed the body with herbs.
In death, they took their wealth with them. The royal tombs of revealed a society that believed the afterlife mirrored their earthly status.
Even kings sought counsel. In the assembly of elders, we see the faint, early glimmers of democratic thought.
The granaries were the banks of Sumer. Grain was currency, and the state's stability depended on the accuracy of the scribe's count. Beer was a gift from the gods, staple of their diet, safer than water, and consumed by everyone from the king to the laborer.
The king proved his right to rule through the hunt. Order conquering chaos, the monarch taming the wild beast.
At its height, the irrigation system was a marvel of engineering, turning the desert into the fertile breadbasket of the ancient world.
Poetry and song filled the air. They asked the eternal questions. Why do we die? What is the meaning of life?
Their craftsmanship remains unrivaled. In gold and electrum, they forged beauty that would survive.
For a time, there was balance. The gods were appeased, the rivers were kind, and Sumer stood as the center of the world. They believed they were the center of existence, a civilized island surrounded by a chaotic sea of barbarians. Diplomacy kept the peace between rival cities. Treaties were carved in stone, the first attempts at international law. The city demanded service. Every citizen owed labor to the state, building the monuments that would outlast them all. Knowledge was power, and it was closely guarded. The scribe class ensured that the secrets of administration remained in their hands. Within the walls, they created paradise, gardens that offered shade and beauty, a reflection of the divine garden of the gods. The third dynasty of marked the final renaissance, a zenith of power, organization, and architectural grandeur.
But no empire lasts forever. The winds of change began to blow from the mountains and the deserts.
Unity was fragile. The city-states turned on each other, consuming their strength in endless border wars over water and land.
From the north came Sargon. The Akkadian conqueror swept through Sumer, uniting the cities by the sword and ending their independence. A new language entered the court. Sumerian began its slow decline from a spoken tongue to a language of scholars and priests. But the true enemy was the land itself. Centuries of irrigation had poisoned the soil with salt. The earth began to die.
Wheat failed. They switched to barley, which tolerates salt, but eventually, even the barley would not grow.
As internal strife grew, the canals were neglected. The lifelines of the cities choked with silt and reeds.
When the harvest fails, the king loses his mandate. The people believed the gods had turned their backs on their rulers. Barbarians from the hills, the Gushans, saw the weakness. They descended like locusts, raiding trade routes and starving the cities.
The omens were bad. The priests read disaster in the entrails of sheep, predicting the wrath of Enlil.
The walls that once projected power now became prisons. Cities were besieged, cut off from the fields that fed them. Famine stalked the streets. The granaries were empty, and the social contract between the ruler and the ruled shattered.
The economy collapsed. A bushel of grain cost a fortune. The complex system of trade and credit ground to a halt.
Nature delivered another blow. The river shifted its course, leaving great cities stranded in the desert, far from the water they needed.
The desert was waiting. As the water receded, the sand crept closer, ready to reclaim what had been stolen.
The final blow came from the east. The Elamites, ancient rivals of Sumer, marched on to settle old scores. The lament for tells the story. The city was set ablaze, its great gates breached, its people scattered.
The defenses crumbled. The last king of was carried away in chains, and the glory of the dynasty was extinguished.
They stripped the temples of gold and silver, but in their fury they smashed the libraries, leaving the floor littered with broken history. Is destroyed, its people are dispersed. The smoke of the burning city rose as a final offering to indifferent gods. Survivors fled. The once great population of Sumer dispersed, absorbed into the rising empires of Babylon and Assyria. Silence fell over the plain. The shouting of merchants, the chanting of priests, the crying of children, all vanished. Where kings once sat, wild animals now roamed. The palaces of mud brick began their slow melt back into the earth.
Mud brick is ephemeral. Without constant care, the ray and wind erode the monumental efforts of...
The people groan. The city is a ruin. The scribes wrote their final laments, preserving the tragedy of their fall. The sand was relentless. It filled the canals, buried the streets, and covered the houses.
Generations passed. Nomads camped on strange mounds in the desert, unaware they were sleeping on top of palaces.
Time is the ultimate conqueror. Decades turned into centuries, and the name of Sumer was forgotten by the world. New empires rose. Babylon built upon the bones of Sumer, adopting their gods and their writing, but forgetting their name.
The language died. It lingered in the temples for a while, but eventually, the last voice to speak Sumerian fell silent.
But in the darkness of the earth, the clay tablets waited. Baked by fire and buried by time, they held their secrets.
The cities became tells, mounds of dirt in a flat landscape. For 2,000 years, the world forgot. The Bible mentioned but to history, Sumer was a myth. The sleep of Sumer was long. The inventors of history had passed out of history, until the spade of the archaeologists struck the earth, and the voices of the past demanded to be heard again. In the 19th century, the sand was cleared away. Tens of thousands of tablets emerged into the light.
We deciphered their code, and suddenly we realized we are the heirs of Sumer.
When we check the time, we use their math. 60 seconds, 60 minutes, a heartbeat of Sumer.
We read their stories and found our own. The fear of death, the search for meaning, the story of a great flood.
The ziggurat of stands again, a broken but defiant monument to human ambition.
They created the first schools, the first laws, the first cities. They were the first to say, I am here and I matter.
The wheel they set in motion has never stopped. It drove the chariot, the car, and the gears of industry.
But their greatest gift was the written word, the ability to speak across time, to defeat death with memory.
The empires are gone. The kings are dust. But the rivers still flow. History began at Sumer, and as long as we write, count, and build, their spirit will never truly die.